Hello, everyone, and good evening to all of you. Good morning to Marty Cagan. He's our very special guest today, and we're super excited. I don't know about you, Dominic, but I am. It's not every day that we get to talk to one of the most influential people in the product space. So how are you feeling, Dominic?
Just as excited as you are. So I can't wait to dig into all the questions that came from the community. And I think we had a very hard time of digesting all the questions and picking out the ones that we thought would be most relevant to all of us. So hopefully we did a good job at that.
Yes, hopefully. And we have a very large audience today. And that is why we also want to kind of introduce Product Tank to all the newbies in our audience. Maybe a couple of you have never heard of Product Tank before. So we prepared a couple of slides for you to let you know what kind of organization you're part of today. So Product Tank, Zurich, and Bern is part of the world's largest product community by product people for product people. This was initiated and it's run by Mind the Product. You might have heard of their conferences, and we're proud and happy to be part of this super great community, worldwide product people shaping and honoring our craft. Cool. So today we're here with Marty Cagan.
So Marty is someone who, so whenever he comes on the show, like the first question is always, so for those two people who do not know Marty, could you please introduce yourself? So I think we're going to do it the same way. So Marty Cagan is the Michael Jordan of product. And my son actually asked me yesterday who Michael Jordan was. And I told him Michael Jordan was the Marty Cagan of basketball. So he understood that. So Marty has been running SVPG, the Silicon Valley Product Group, for many, many years with his team. He's a best-selling author, has written, I think, 2 of the most read product books in the history, Empowered, exactly, and Inspired. I'm sure we'll get into some of that content in a bit. And yeah, I mean, we're super happy to have him here and give him all the questions that our community is looking for getting answers to. So I would say without further ado, should we continue?
Yes, please. Marty, will you join us on stage? Perfect. Welcome. Hello. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. And thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for making time for us. We're super excited to have you. Listen, we gathered lots of questions from our community for today's session. So I think we could talk for hours. But before we start digging into all those questions, let us start with one question that was very pressing when Dominic and me prepared for the event, which is like, if you could ask for one question that you never want to get asked again, which one would it be?
Which question would I not want to be asked again?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm actually one of those people that loves questions. I especially love questions I've never had before, which I've been doing this so long, that's pretty rare, to be honest. But I don't mind. Questions are a good, healthy sign. And it also, questions tell me a lot. They tell me where the person is coming from and how far along, how long they've thought about these issues. So I benefit from the questions too. And sometimes when I either hear a new question or questions I'm getting multiple times, it gives me an idea for an article that I write about.
Oh, cool.
And so
Dominic, you can make history.
That's right. I like it.
Cool, but I can imagine that lots of questions have been asked a lot of times, right? So a couple of questions might come up every time. So why is it that the same questions keep popping up while you have read all those awesome books that should help the product community answer all those questions, right? Why do they keep popping up?
Well, that's actually a very big and complex question, because you could also rephrase it as, why is there so much noise and confusion in the product community? There really is. It's a mess. I feel so sorry for a new product manager that comes in and they want to become great, but then where do you turn? Who do you look to? Because it's not just, the truth is there are many very different and conflicting opinions about product. And the first thing you have to do is decide who you're going to listen to, which is hard, which is honestly hard if you don't know. The lucky people, I was lucky, had somebody to guide them. Mm-hmm. And I remember being told, this is who you want to listen to. And I remember being told that there were many others, don't listen to that. And I remember on my own, I read one of the other books, and this was early in product, but there were still some books. And I went to the person who was coaching me and I said, I am so confused. This is like nothing you've been teaching me. And he said, I told you not to read that stuff because it's a bunch of nonsense out there. And it's still a bunch of nonsense out there. There are more good voices than ever, but there are also more crazy voices than ever. So it's very difficult, and I have a lot of sympathy for new product people. If I could change one thing in the world, it would be that we're related to product people.
Right.
It would be that every product person has a capable, experienced manager who is dedicated to helping them get better at their job.
Cool.
Is that one of the reasons that you wrote, the books that you did? Is it, cutting through that noise and trying to be one of the reasonable sources that people can rely on?
Oh, absolutely. I was interested in the book, and I've been writing articles, which are really, every article is meant to be, it's like an MVP for a chapter in a book. But I've been doing this for many years because where else is it? I don't know where else it is. Most of the people that write about product are writing about the kind of stuff that I was advised to stay away from. So I didn't have a source, so I started writing it and sharing it myself. Most of the things I write about, the people in the best product companies tell me, oh, well, we've known that forever. But in the rest of the world, in other kinds of companies, that's where they're often very surprised. Because there's just a very big difference between how good product companies work and how the rest work. And unfortunately, as much as I hate to admit this, I think the gap is getting bigger, not smaller.
Right. So there's a paradoxon that I've been noticing in my bubble, at least when I work with clients or talk to product people. So it seems like lots of product owners and product managers are like asking to be more empowered, right? And at the same time, I have a lot of management people from other companies that say, like, my product owners don't take enough ownership. I want them to work in terms of being more on like an entrepreneur or like own their product. So where does this come from? That everybody's kind of calling for more ownership, but is it something different to be empowered from, depending from where you look at it?
Yeah, and actually that's, you're probably not going to like what I'm going to say here, but it's this particular problem is probably worse in Europe. And I think the reason for that is because of what you said several times in there, product owners. Product owners are not interesting and not helpful. Product managers are. And one of the biggest issues, and we don't have this distinction in good product companies. This is a distinction that unfortunately is a regrettable consequence of the move to Agile. When the Agile coaches said, well, you need a product owner, and we didn't have, you didn't have any in these companies because they used to be banks or they used to be, telcos, Deutsche Telekom, things like that. And they didn't have product managers. So they took people that were not at all qualified and they taught them a very easy process, right? They taught them Scrum. And they said, you are a product owner. And that's so, it's just as ridiculous as going to an engineer and saying, okay, we're going to teach you how to use Jira because, you have to update the tickets. And once you've learned Jira, you're now an engineer. That's ridiculous. Just like it's ridiculous that somebody says, I've a certified Scrum product owner and I'm a product manager. So the first thing you could really do and help, and I'm not just talking the Product Tank, Zurich, I'm talking about all over the world, but especially problematic in Europe. Stop calling yourself a product owner if you're trying to be a product manager. Product owner is just a role on an agile team. And what's really going on is those leaders are realizing that they need to step up and they need product managers, not product owners. Anybody can be a product owner. Product manager is hard.
Yeah.
And so it does mean working a lot harder to become a product manager. And there's no way I know of to be an empowered team without a real product manager.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense. So I know it's a hard habit to break, but now when somebody tells me I'm a product owner, I ask, really? Is that all you are? You get paid to be just a product owner? That's like 5% of the job of a product manager. Or are you really trying to be a product manager, but you're confused and maybe untrained as to what you're really responsible for?
Right. This resonates a lot with me, and I totally agree. At the same time, I feel like when people step up from the role of product owner to become more of a product manager, owning strategy, owning like the vision, owning the decisions.
They don't do that, by the way, as a product manager. We can come back to that.
Right.
That's not what a product manager does either.
Right. But some people try to do that, right? And I think that's part of the problem, because then management sometimes feels threatened by this new role and kind of doesn't want to let go of certain areas or include others in certain strategic decisions, because sometimes you then spot that there is no proper product company strategy in place and stuff like that. So I think, please do iterate on that and explain why or what it is that a product manager does and owns.
Yeah, well, and you're really describing a situation where there's just, you might end up, you're in a company and nobody there has ever really seen it done well. This is kind of the problem. If they had, then it'd be easy. They know what to do. If you have a leader in your company that's worked for several years at a good product company, this is so much easier because they know how to set things up. But if you don't, it's very random. So, you just described product leadership responsibilities, which is a very big set of responsibilities, but not the product manager's responsibilities. So we have company leaders like the CEO. We have product leaders. You're normally the chief product officer or VP product, director product. And we have obviously product managers, which should be in really every case the product owner. So we can forget about product owner. That's just a role that the product manager plays.
Right.
Product, this is we could take an hour just on this one question. We could actually, realistically, it takes me a week to answer that question properly. What is product management responsible for? What is product leadership responsible for? The short answer, even though I'm not really trying to sell books, the short answer is read Inspired if you want to know what a product manager is responsible for. Read Empowered if you want to know what product leaders are responsible for. In short, a product manager, real product manager of an empowered team, not talking of a feature team or a delivery team, which is essentially just a project manager. In a real product team that is empowered to figure out solutions that our customers love, the product manager is specifically responsible for making sure the solutions that are built are valuable and viable. The designer is responsible for making sure it's usable. The engineers are responsible for making sure it's feasible. But valuable and viable, which are usually the two hardest, are on the product manager. Valuable means, will a customer really buy this? Or if they've already bought the service, it's a new capability, will they choose to use it? And viable means, will it actually work for our business? Can we afford to pay for it? Can we monetize it? Can we market it effectively? Can we sell it effectively? Is it legal in these countries? Is it compliant? That's hard. Now, those are two hard things. Just think about those questions, though, around value and viability. A typical Scrum team, just with a bunch of engineers, None of them are going to know the answers to those questions. Even designers won't know the answers to those questions. That's what a product manager brings to a team, is the knowledge of the customer, the knowledge of the data, the knowledge of the industry, and the knowledge of your own company's workings, so that they can answer these questions. Because the whole idea of an empowered team is to push the decisions down to the team. Mm-hmm. Which sounds great until you realize that means you have to have people on the team that know how to that know what they're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So I have one more follow-up question on this, and then Dominic, it's your turn again. So I have been noticing that when it comes to desirability, there's a lot of movement. I see more and more product managers kind of taking ownership for that and really working on their discovery skills. When it comes to viability, a lot of people are kind of afraid to talk numbers, to understand how business models work. Is this something that you notice too, or is it just, again, something that is maybe specific to our area here? That's question number one. And maybe question number two, if somebody discovers that they have a weak spot when it comes to viability, do you have any tips on how to ramp up your skills there?
Well, yes. First of all, this is minimum skills for a product manager. Mm-hmm. So let's be very honest with the people who want to be a product manager. You need to know. One of the things that several companies, Google is most famous for this, is when Google hires product managers, they want to know that you're going to be able to learn all the different parts of the business. And one of the ways they do that is they want somebody who's proven they can learn at least 2 parts of a business. It might be design and engineering. It might be sales and marketing. It might be product, but they have to know enough, because what you really do is need to learn several. Now, in the book Empowered, but also you can get these articles that I'm mentioning here. These chapters are in article format for free on the site. One of the most important chapters is the assessment. It starts by you assess the person to find out, because no matter who they are, no matter how great they are, nobody's born knowing all this stuff. No, in fact, I'll share with you, when I was an engineer and then an engineering leader, and I wanted to learn product. And so my manager couldn't do it. My manager was a VP engineering and didn't know product himself. So he arranged for a very successful person I was at HP Labs at the time to coach me on product. And the first thing he did was assess me. And I knew I was not naive. I knew I had a lot of, weaknesses, because I had just done the engineering side. But even what I thought were strengths, like I thought because I'd been an engineer and I was going to do products for other engineers, at least I know my customers. And he's like, no, that's never true. And he said, he made it so that he said I could not make a single product decision for the team until after I visited 30 customers. He arranged 2 trips, 15 in the US and 15 in Europe. And the very first thing I learned was I didn't know anything about our customers. And I thought I did. And of course, that's worse than knowing, it's worse than not knowing. But I didn't know anything. Our customers were very different. Another thing he did was he assessed my knowledge of the financial side. And this was an area, in truth, I knew. I had never had an accounting course in college. I had computer science courses. So I never had finance. And I wasn't living in a cave. I knew there were things like balance sheets and stuff like that. But he asked me questions. Like I remember he said, do you know what LTV stands for? And I said, sure, lifetime value. He said, good. Do you know how we calculate that? And I was like, no idea. No idea. So he said, okay, the truth is you don't know anything about finance. And so he did 2 things for my plan, my coaching plan. One was he gave me a book to read, a very, good book on basically not trying to teach me to be an accountant, but teaching me how businesses make business decisions with financial analytics. And the other thing he did is he called a friend of his in the finance organization and asked that person to tutor me on the financial metrics. He said, this person knows everything about the financials of your products. He said, the thought that the product manager doesn't know that is terrible. So he said, this person is going to teach you what each number means, how it's derived, and what's good. So I didn't even know what was good. I looked at a dashboard, but 4% click-through rate on this. Is that good? Is that horrible? I didn't know. And so he helped me on all of these. He said, here's the problem. This is the most important thing to really fix to change the health of this product. And so the point was, everybody I know needs help like this. Even, by the way, like I was an engineer that wanted to learn products, so obviously I'm going to have a lot of gaps. But sometimes we hire people, like you could hire a great product manager out of Google who's done great work. They will still need help coming up to speed because they don't know how decisions are made in your company. They don't know your technology stack. They don't know your customers. They don't know your product lines. They will still need help. So the first article is how to assess a product person. Right. And the follow-on article is, for all the different things, what are the ways you can help somebody get better? Because there are a lot. I mean, at this point, I don't think I've ever not had to coach somebody on every specific dimension. I mean, this is normal. So I just gave you some examples of how you learn about customers, how you learn about finance, but there are examples about how you learn about everything. Right. And so, yes, it's a high bar to become a product manager. And as soon as you do that work, you realize how ridiculous it is to have somebody that's just a product owner supposedly responsible for a product team. The truth is the engineers and designer on those teams are being cheated out of a good work environment.
Yeah, maybe speaking of work environment and support and help, I'd like to pick up one of the top questions asked by the community, which is around culture. And I'll just read it. So the question is, how do you convince maybe more project-oriented company leaders to embrace the product organization as its own important entity and allow them to implement modern practices? So we have different variations of this question. I think it's basically people reading, about all these modern practices and reading about how good should look like and having this feeling of that's not what it looks like at my company. What are some of the ways and some of the tactics that they can start implementing, hands-on to start affecting some change?
Yeah, this is one of the most common questions. This is the transformation question. How do you change your company to become like one of the best companies? Because first of all, it's hard to change a company. And it's culture for sure, but it's more than culture. There's a lot of politics involved, for example. One of the things that makes it hard is that it's really not that hard to get the product managers, designers, and engineers to step up and do what they need to do. I mean, the hardest part of that is what we talked about. The product managers are usually the weakest link, so they need help. But it's not that hard to get those areas. The problem is, changes go way beyond the product and technology organization. It impacts finance. It impacts how you fund. It impacts how you staff. It impacts HR. It impacts your sales organization, your marketing organization. It impacts your business development, how you actually do deals. So that's pretty much the whole company. And so without the active support of the CEO, it doesn't happen. Because what happens is the product organization gets all excited. It's easy to get them excited. And then the stakeholders say, no, not interested. This is how we do it. If you don't want to do it, we'll find somebody else that will build my features. And so what happens is then eventually the CEO is confronted with a conflict. They have a product organization wants to work one way. They have stakeholders and executives that want to work a different way. And this is where we really test the CEO. And this is also why we tell companies that if you want to transform, the most important factor is the CEO. If that CEO is not on board to provide the support that's necessary, it won't go anywhere. And by the way, this is why most agile transformations do nothing meaningful. Sure, should you move to agile? Yes. At least Scrum or Kanban or XP, you should move there. But does that change anything really? Not in most companies, because you have much bigger issues to tackle. So that's, we tell CEOs that's what's going to matter, because ultimately they will be tested by those stakeholders. And because what we're really talking about, if you read between the lines, is in you called it a project-based organization, also known as a feature team organization, a delivery team organization. The stakeholders are really in control. And the tech, whatever it is, are really there to serve the business. That's a subservient model. They are there to serve the business. In a product organization, it's completely different. The product teams are actually there to serve real customers in ways that customers love, but also work for the business. So we don't ignore the business, but they are no longer in control. They are true partners with the product organization. It moves from the subservient model to the collaborative model. And that, look, be honest, that's a loss of power for several of your most senior executives. Most of them will not go along with that happily. So they need support from the CEO. Now, luckily, you might wonder then, how does any company ever change? And the answer is because they have to. Because companies like, pick your favorite, Stripe is disrupting financial. Amazon is disrupting everybody. Shopify is disrupting e-commerce. It just means that companies, if they don't do this, many of them are losing. Many of them are being disruptive. And in many cases, it's too late. Many cases, it's too late already. Once Amazon is already going after you, it's probably too late if you haven't developed the muscles beforehand. And fortunately, that's what is motivating most CEOs. Their board is telling them, either you do this, you lead this, or we will put in somebody as CEO that will. That's what's happened in several companies that have successfully transformed. But it's hard.
Maybe staying with the, with the companies that have successfully transformed, like if we have any CEOs, let's imagine we would have a couple of CEOs in this session. Like what would they need to take away from this talk so that they can start enabling their organization to make it easier to transform into a more product-led or more customer-centric way of working?
The truth is they don't have to be experts in this. They do have to be meaningfully supportive of this. And so I hope I didn't lose you. Oh, you're there still.
No, we're here.
We're still here. Hi.
But they have to be supportive, so they will be tested. The easiest thing I would encourage those executives to do, read the book Empowered. It will speak directly to what you need to set up as part of a leadership organization, leadership team. And if you don't want to read a whole book, there's an article called Keys to Successful Transformation that will summarize the 10 most important things for you as CEO to make sure happens. And so it's not really that bad. Where they often have a lot of pain, the CEOs, I'm being very blunt here. Some of your listeners might not like this, but sometimes, for example, the main thing the CEO needs to do is replace the head of technology, replace the head of product, because they don't have people that know how to do what needs to be done. And so sometimes they have to do that. an alternative that I often suggest is if they have somebody they believe is very good, potentially good head of technology, good head of product, but they've never done it before. They've never worked in a good product company before. That's where product coaches are really valuable, to be able to give them, just like CEOs have CEO coaches, there are several CTO coaches and CPO coaches. In fact, in the book Empowered, I profiled several of them. Mm-hmm. So you can learn about what they do. But one way or another, they have to make sure they have people that can get the job done. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where they earn their salary.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough decision. So it's a lot about the people, maybe also getting rid of their egos and stuff like that. What kind of role does the organization, the org chart, play in all of this? Like, can you detect, by looking at an org chart, can you detect typical problems? Or is it like, no matter the org chart, if you have the right people in place, the company can succeed?
Well, I think it's the latter mostly, if you have the right people in place. But there's no question, certain organization charts make it more difficult and certain make it easier. So, for example, if you don't have a true product leader and a true technology leader that report up to a very senior person, usually the CEO or a COO, then that's a sign of a problem. If you have product buried under marketing, it's a sign of a problem. So if you have product buried under technology, it's a sign of a problem. Or if instead of having a CTO running product engineering, you have a CIO, a very common problem in Europe, by the way, then that's a sign of a problem. So could you overcome these? Sure, but they make it harder. Since you are in Europe, one of the problems I would also highlight, it's less about org chart, but many leaders in Europe, for whatever reason, I don't understand all the reasons for this, but too many of the leaders in Europe lean too much on process. And it's really not about process. I often have to tell people in Europe, stop worrying so much about process. It's not about process. You're hiding behind process. Jeff Bezos likes to call process the clearest sign of day 2 behaviors, meaning that it's very easy for process to become the thing. And what we need to do is make sure that's not the case. Like Netflix says, lead with context, not with process. It's, you want to push decisions down to the team. The main way good companies scale is not with process. They're scaling with leaders, good leaders. So that's a whole other conversation.
If I may ask, because we're very blunt here, let me also ask a very blunt question. So if you observe this in Europe, do you think, this over-relying on process, do you think it's a result of leaders not understanding what's going on? Or is it the leaders do understand, but the teams and the, engineers, designers, PMs are just not up to the task, so they try and control with process? Or is it like both parties just have no clue how to build proper product in Europe?
No, it's first thing I should say is there are some great companies in Europe, some of the best in the world. Yeah, some of the best in the world. Trainline in the UK is a poster child for great product. I still think Spotify is doing a terrific job and has continued. And you have to realize Spotify is competing against 2 of the best companies in the world. They compete against Amazon and Apple every day, and they have held their own. So, we were chatting before. What ImmoScout has done, obviously they started like 15 years ago, but they were amazing what they did. Better than really any other real estate marketplace in the world. And so we have to be careful on these generalizations. The part that's always sort of confused me about Europe And again, this is a big generalization, so take it with a grain of salt. But as a general rule, Europe has among the best talent in the world. It has amazing engineers, great designers. Most countries would love to have that. And what I think is frustrating to me is when I see this talent, especially this engineering talent, but I see leaders and managers honestly from like the 1960s, 1970s, and how they think about leadership. That is what's sad. And fundamentally, there's a whole theory behind this, which is there's two kinds of management styles. One is called command and control. And that's where the more senior you are, you're the boss, right? And you tell people what to do.
Right.
And the other style is the empowered model, where you push decisions and authority down to the people. And the idea is you're pushing it down to the people who are close to the technology and close to the customers, because who better to make decisions? Now, I want to be clear. This is not US versus Europe. What I just said, you can find right in San Francisco. You can find companies that are command and control, all feature teams, horrible environment. People hate working there. And right across the street, you can find great teams where they are truly empowered. So it exists right in San Francisco. I've seen it in Seattle. I've seen it in New York, both kinds of companies. But I will also say, if you pick any of the companies that are really doing well anywhere in the world, I find them consistently using that empowered model.
Right.
Consistently.
Yeah. You talked about loss of power, about collaboration, empowering people. Let's maybe talk about B2B versus B2C. Do you see any difference there? Because I keep hearing like in B2B that, sales is maybe more reluctant to let go of this close connection to the customer. People keep telling me it's so hard to do discovery in B2B. What's your take on that?
Well, it's actually easier to do discovery. The problem is most B2B companies, and by the way, this applies worldwide from what I've seen, most B2B companies are terrible at product. They shouldn't be, but they are. Now, a long time ago, one of the most successful venture capitalists in our industry explained to me why he always thought that was the case. And he says, because most enterprise B2B companies are actually run by salespeople, as opposed to consumer companies are almost always run by product people. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the culture stems from there. It is very hard to set up an empowered product organization and do good product work in a company where sales is really driving everything from the very top. Mm-hmm. Now, today, that's really changing. There are great enterprise software companies. One of my favorites is a company called Workiva, which is based not in any tech hub. It's in very rural part of the US. And their products are rated higher. They do enterprise software for financial reporting. Their products are rated higher than Apple products. And that's enterprise software. Mm-hmm. But their leaders created that company saying they wanted to use the best consumer techniques to create business products. And their motto is that basically, why is it that at home you have great products to use, and then you go to work and you see this horrible software? Right. You ever seen SAP or Oracle Financials? These are terrible products that you wouldn't wish on anybody. But that's not because they need to be. And the irony is it's actually easier to do those kinds of products really well if you have good leadership that lets you, and you use the techniques of the best product teams, which are typically consumer techniques.
So it's actually the same kind of discovery that you can do in B2B, or do you see any difference in the techniques that they use?
Well, at a conceptual level, it's the same kind. You're still trying to do solutions that are valuable, usable, feasible, viable. There are different techniques and different flavors of those techniques that we use. The big difference, the obvious difference, I mean, there's sort of two giant differences. One is that with consumer products, every user is a buyer, right? So every user is the customer. But with B2B products, it's almost never that way. There's very big differences between the users, and there are many kinds of users, and the buyer. And there are also influencers. So there's a whole ecosystem you are selling into. So we have techniques that are based on that. The other difference is with consumer products, we usually get lots of data traffic pretty quickly. With enterprise products, we usually have much lesser amount of data. So we use less of the quantitative techniques and more of the qualitative techniques.
Cool, thank you. So we have a question from the audience that could maybe also go into this discussion at this point. So the question is about co-located teams, right? You are a big advocate of co-located teams. So what did change now with this new remote setup that many companies find themselves in these past couple of months? Did anything change about that? What's your take on how product work changes in remote settings?
Yes. And by the way, if you follow, when the pandemic first happened and we were all forced into working from home, several companies said, work from home, it's the future. We're going to close our offices. We're going to make it. In fact, remember, even Google announced that was going to be a long-term thing. But if you've been following, you might have noticed that most of those companies have backtracked on that for really two reasons. One is they have seen innovation go way down. And the other is a lot of their employees have said they don't want to work from home. So first of all, those of you with kids know sometimes working at the office is a rest compared to what it's like at home. So, they miss that separation. So that's an important dynamic. But more generally, what we learned was that every product team does two things all the time. They're always discovering the next thing they need to build, the valuable, usable, feasible, viable, and they're also building it. And the truth is the delivery work, the building it, works quite well in generally with work from home. In fact, I have talked to some teams that are convinced it's working better. Now, the obvious advantage is you can hire people from anywhere, which is a huge advantage. And by the way, we needed to do that even before the pandemic because there's no more room in San Francisco for headquarters. There's no more room in New York City. There's no more room in London. So we need to do that. And so that's all good to be able to take advantage. But one of the things that companies really have learned is that discovery, which is really, that's where the innovation comes from. Discovery is what's been suffering during the pandemic because discovery really requires a level of intense collaboration that is not impossible over Zoom, but is really a lot harder.
Yeah.
A lot harder. And so, it gets into psychology again, but a lot of people have been hired into their company during the pandemic. They have never even met face-to-face their colleagues. They have never had that chance to build relationships and to build trust. And so the most common thing I hear I just talked to somebody, even joined a very good team at Amazon, and he was complaining to me, he feels like an outsider, and it's been 6 months, but he feels like an outsider. He's like not in the clique, because they don't know him. And it's like, discovery is like the least of the issues. He can't even really engage in healthy ways that people want to. So, I do think over time, the collaboration and the tools will get better. But right now, the tools focus on communication, not real collaboration. And so we have a lot of work to do there. Also, coaching is both, it's more required and takes more time. So this is a big topic, but I do think I'm pretty confident, and I've been confident in this for a while because I've been watching this in teams for years, and teams were struggling with this even before the pandemic of, hiring remote people because they can't compete against Google for the same talent. So I'm pretty convinced that it will be a hybrid model. That what I do think is going to be gone is the old idea of a giant corporate headquarters where everybody, thousands of people come to the corporate office, the Apple idea. Even Apple's creating another campus. But what I do think the future is really Google led the way on this, Facebook led the way on this, which is hundreds of small satellite offices where people can work from home a few days a week and work together a few days a week. Tap into talent all over the world. I think that will be the future. And that's a good future because it really gets the best of both.
Very good. I have a couple of culture questions. I think the culture questions were some of the top questions that we got from our community. So one of the things that came up again and again was stakeholder management. I guess it's one of those questions that you basically ask yourself, why is this still coming up after all those years? So in terms of stakeholder management, what are like tried and tested ways for especially product leaders to make sure that they are working on the things that matter to the customers and the market versus implementing someone's pet feature or just doing something because somebody said so?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple big things going on here. One is are we talking a feature team company or are we talking an empowered product team company? In a feature team company, the easiest thing to do is just to realize your job is to try to please as many of those stakeholders as you can. So it's not even really that's not what in a good product company, that is not even what we mean by stakeholder management. But that's because essentially, if you're a feature team company and you've been set up to do as many of the features as fast as you can that this business unit needs, then you're really a project manager. That's what I mean. As a product manager, you're really a project manager trying to get as much of that stuff designed, as much of that stuff coded, QA'd, deployed as possible. You don't have responsibility for value. You don't have responsibility for viability. And so it really is a project manager. And so embrace it, do as best you can. We know how to do that. That's just not my interest. What I focus on is the other situation. Now, again, it doesn't mean ignoring stakeholders, but imagine, we talked at the beginning, you asked about what is a real product manager, not a product owner, but a real product manager responsible for. And I described how they really have to understand the business. They have to understand how it's sales, marketing, finance, monetization, all this is done. Imagine if you are a stakeholder and that's your partner versus a product owner. This is night and day difference. It's a true partnership there where they can say, look, okay, this is great. You're able to help me solve really hard problems for the business instead of just making me decide what features I think are most important. So I argue it's a much better job for the stakeholders as well. But it's a very different, it's a partnership. It's like you're collaborating with a great company instead of just have some, junior IT organization to implement features.
So maybe one follow-up question to that is that one of the reasons why maybe so many product leaders are involved in politics rather than crafting product visions, product strategy, because they haven't shown that they are worthy of taking on business responsibility?
I mean, first of all, we should clarify. I just answered for product managers. Product leaders are technically the managers and the leaders of product management, product design, and engineering. Okay, so now we're talking product leaders. Product leaders are really only relevant, in my view, in an empowered organization. They have a very different job in a feature team organization. They're mostly there to make sure you have the staff you need and to keep the trains running on time, right? That's a very different job. But now if you have an empowered product organization where you are there to serve customers in ways that work for the business. Now, these leaders have a very big job. It starts with product vision. What is the product vision that's going to deliver for the, I want to be clear, product vision isn't done by product managers. It's done by the product leaders. What are you trying to do in the next 5 to 10 years? What are you trying to create? How are you trying to make the lives of your customers better in 5 to 10 years? That's the product vision. Product principles kind of go with that. Talk about the nature of the products you're building. Team topology. How are you going to structure your organization so that you can deliver on that vision? Your CTO is responsible for the product architecture that can deliver on that vision and support the topology. And then, of course, the most important thing really for most teams is the product leaders are responsible for the product strategy, which is how we deliver on that vision while meeting the needs of the business. And most importantly, the product strategy is where we get the problems to solve that we're going to assign to the teams. Because the fundamental difference between empowered teams and feature teams is you give feature teams a roadmap of features and projects to build, but you give empowered teams a set of problems to solve, customer problems and business problems to solve. How do you identify the most important problems? That's what product strategy is. That's what's done by the product leaders. Notice product strategy is not even a relevant concept in a feature team organization.
Yeah. So true. So, and we started talking about the future, right? With the product vision, you start looking into the future, 5 to 10 years ahead. So, if we apply that to like the product community, our craft, basically. So, where would you like us to be in the future in 5 to 10 years? What kind of conversations do you think we are going to have in 5 years talking about product management? Is it still going to be the same stuff, or is there anything new coming?
Well, so first of all, you're asking me what would I like it to be, or are you asking me what do I think it will be?
You can tell us both.
Because I've learned that just because I wish something doesn't mean it's going to be true. I think it's terrible waste of talent and humanity that so many thousands of companies are still, I mean, a lot of them are even worse than feature teams. They're running ridiculous processes out there like SAFe. They're just there to ship code, whether it's good or bad. It's a huge waste of human potential. So in my ideal world, we don't waste people with that. All the brains, all the careers, all the capability, we don't waste it. We leverage it. So it would be very common that if it was up to me, in 10 years, all companies would be running the way the best companies do. And they would really be, then the effectiveness would be a function of really what people could come up with, the real true level of innovation. Right now, there's a set of companies that can innovate and a set of companies that can't innovate to save their lives. And those companies are the ones that are ripe for disruption. Now, that's what I hope would happen. What I think would happen is it's probably not going to be that way in 10 years. I mean, I always hope if you'd asked me that exact question both 10 years ago and 20 years ago, I think I'd have said the same thing. And look where we are. So yeah, it's slow. It's slow. There's just a lot of reasons. A lot of it is to ego, that people like being, in control, telling others what to do, that whole idea.
Maybe the next book is going to be called Disrupted, and you're going to talk about this in your next book. Dominic, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, so let's, again, on being blunt, let's for a moment just say, okay, we've got all these established companies they just don't want to understand what true products, how true products should be built. Let's just forget about those for a second. And let's focus on all those young and motivated people who are about to start their companies. Like, what are the 2-3 things that you would give them as future CEOs so that they can shape a future that you just described a couple of minutes ago? Like, what are the key takeaways for up and coming CEOs to create this better way of doing product?
Well, at the very beginning, we were talking about it's hard to know which direction to go. There are more resources now than there has ever been. It is, I think, and I've been now nearly 40 years doing exclusively tech-powered products. I've never seen it so good. It is like the best time ever to start a tech company. The costs have never been lower. The talent, there's never been so much talent. We know how to do this. You just need to, if you're an aspiring CEO, startup CEO, or an aspiring product manager, I think it takes a little bit of luck, because you have to find yourself to the right sources that can really help you succeed. They are there. You just need to be able to know the difference. Now, my favorite, what I recommend always for a new product person, I say the most important thing is not what company you work for. The most important thing is who your manager is. Mm-hmm. So do some work on LinkedIn. Find a manager that has worked at a good product company. Talk to that hiring manager about how you really want to learn from them, how to become great. Which, by the way, most managers, that's what they would love to talk about. I want to help you become great. But tell them, I've came here because of you. I really want to learn from you how to be awesome. I'm willing to do work. You have to show, no manager is going to commit to coaching you if you don't commit to putting in the effort. That's another discussion. I often get in these philosophical debates with my friends in Europe because it's a different emotion around the relationship of work in your life, and I realize this is a very American thing to say, but Bezos likes to describe it as we want people to think like owners, not like employees. And I think that's a hugely important thing. And of course, it's easy for us to do that. We just make people owners. We give them stock options. That's a lot less common in Europe, and I think that's a real unfortunate for Europe, because it really does make a difference. You want people to feel like an owner. I'm not talking about hours you work. Mm-hmm. It's about how much they care.
Right.
It's about how much they care. And so this is an essential ingredient. So if you can find a manager that will help you get better at your job, that's awesome. And if you're a startup CEO, if you're lucky enough to get an investor that knows what they're doing and can help you become a great CEO, that would help. Or a CEO coach or whatever. But that's, I think, really the key. The resources are there and have never been better. It's also true, you just have to buyer beware, right? It means there are many people out there trying to sell you things that are not going to help you, and you have to be careful.
Right. So if people are now hooked on the idea of becoming a PM and entering this wonderful job, and they want to know if a company is really working in an empowered way, right? So you just talked about finding out who will be your leader. Are they interested in coaching you? Is there anything else you can do from the outside to really understand if a company is really empowered? Like people in there are empowered, or is it impossible from the outside to judge?
I don't know that it's impossible, but it's pretty easy to judge on an interview when you get let inside. A handful of questions and you'll have a very good sense. And I share those questions, by the way, there's an article called Empowered Product Teams. And at the end, it's like, there's just 3 questions. Just make sure if they're empowered, you'll know that from the answers to the questions. It's easy. They're not offensive. They're just straightforward. So it's not that hard. From the outside, it's harder to tell. Other than, most of the time, if a company is truly innovating, consistently innovating, and by that I mean consistently adding value to the company and to the customers, then we usually know that. We know that. If you're a user of those products, you just see them get better and better and better. You know, we all watch that happen with Slack. We've all watched that happen with Shopify. We've all just AWS for years. We've watched it get better. It's like, even if you've never set foot in Amazon, you know, oh my God, they know what they're doing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Dominic, do you have a last question? I think it's almost time to wrap up.
I have one last question. It's actually from your pile of questions, Tanya. So it's again a question from our community, and one question that I've also been asking myself. So in some of your talks, you know, you spend some time explaining what good discovery looks like, you know, how that looks like, and you talk about iterations, and you talk about the best team doing 20, 30, 40 iterations per week. And the question is basically, what are those iterations? Are those just text changes? Are those fundamental changes? So if you can maybe give us some examples of what those iterations look like, that would help the community.
Yeah, I mean, and I hope, you know, anybody who reads the Inspired book, I'm hoping they get a good sense of what that is. But the short answer is there are lots of iterations of prototypes. Even though there's some iterations we do that don't even involve a prototype, they're even lighter weight than that. Vast majority of them are prototypes, and the vast majority of those are simulation or user prototypes. So they're using tools like Figma, they're using tools like InVision, and they are very quickly iterating. Some of those iterations are small. They might, I mean, you mentioned text. You know, maybe you test with a user and they're like, what the heck does that mean? And then you realize, oh, well, that word is only used in our company. We need to get a better stuff. Sure. But that would be rare. It's more often that we say, yeah, they did not like this capability at all, or they didn't even figure out how to use this, or whatever. And so most of the changes are there's really two kinds of changes we do. We decide to take a different approach to solve the problem, or we iterate on the current approach to solving that problem. And obviously, when you're iterating on a current approach, it's usually more minor. The changes might be just a design issue. It might be a functionality issue. It could be anything. And if you are taking a whole new approach, then it's like, yeah, that's where you're using. That's why we love these prototype tools. We can take a whole new approach in a few hours. So it's not unusual. The other thing to keep in mind that not everybody catches, understands is, you know, when we talk about even 50 iterations in a week, and I want to be clear, it's not hard to do 50 iterations in a week. I've seen teams do that in a day. But you have to realize a lot of the iterations never go outside the company. They're just for us, the product manager, the designer, and the engineers. Meaning what that really means is, why would we show it to a customer? We don't even think it's very good. That's what's very common. We'll spend the first 10, 20 iterations just us, which of course, if we're co-located, becomes super easy and fast. If we're not co-located, we have to schedule this time. So it's again, not impossible. It just drags it out. But we look at it and the designer says, yeah, I thought this was going to be a good way to use it, but no, this is not going to be good. Or the engineer says, yeah, if we build it, this is what we do, it's going to hit a bunch of technical debt issues and it's going to take us forever to do. We need to do this in a different way. Or the product manager will say, oh, I know this sounds so good, but our lawyers will say no, because this is actually not allowed in the EU. So most of our iterations never get past the three of us. They don't. So how long does that take? Yeah, that takes like 20 minutes for us to play with a prototype and decide what we don't like about it, and then we try something else. But after a little bit, you know, maybe 10 iterations, depends on how hard the problem is we're trying to solve. We're like, you know what? We're feeling pretty good about this. I think we should show it to the customer we lined up. So let's see what the customers think. Right. And of course, we're not asking them what we think. This is we are seeing whether they could use it and whether they would buy it. Right. But that is that's how iterations go fast, and it really boils down to prototypes.
Right.
That's why there are so many prototyping companies, and you might notice they're worth quite a bit today, because this is very empowering for a team.
Right. This is one great reason to hope for all of us to be more collocated soon again, right? It will help our product work become even better and us having even more fun doing our product work. Thank you so much. I think we're at the end of our session for today. We had lots of questions. Probably we didn't manage to get to ask one of the questions that you never heard before, or did we?
They were all good questions. So for sure, they were good questions. Yeah. I hope it was useful. And I know I'm a little tough, and I hope you don't get the impression that I don't absolutely love working with teams in Europe and visiting Europe. I love it. I'm just trying to be honest with you, and I say the same things to teams in San Francisco all the time.
Absolutely. We don't take it personally. It just is going to help us become better in the future. So thank you for being so honest with us. And Dominic, maybe you have a few words to say to close up the session today.
Well, I think now we know why Michael Jordan is the Marty Cagan of basketball. And no, from the whole Product Tank, Bern, and Zurich team, there's two of our team members in the background operating the whole system. From all of us, huge thank you for coming to our session, answering all our questions, and also for the audience. I think we had 250-ish or 60-ish, something like that. People join us. I see lots of comments, some clapping, people saying thank you and awesome. So a huge thank you. Thanks for coming out. And hopefully, if we can repeat this, we will have very, very good questions that hopefully will make you let's pause for a second and go, that's a very
write even more new articles about stuff
exactly.
that will help us do better product work. And maybe one day we will be able to host you in Switzerland in person. That would be awesome. Until then, take good care, stay healthy, and all the best. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Marty.
Tschüss.
He said tschüss, right?
He did say tschüss. And this is our upcoming event, a learning lunch with Petra Wille. Many of you might have heard that she just launched a new book called Strong, about how to build strong product teams, and she's gonna do a learning lunch with us in June. And she's gonna show us how to use some of her tools from the book, how to do like a self-assessment and some other tools from her book. So if you want to do some hands-on product work, then you can join us on June 8th with Petra Wille. Thank you for listening in.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening or good day wherever you are, and hope to see you soon.
Bye.